Hello everyone, and welcome to the first episode of my new series, Railway Series Reread, where we'll be rereading the Railway series and just kind of hanging out and talking about it. Today we'll be taking a look at the very first book published in the Railway series, The Three Railway Engines, published on May 12th, 1945, but this version is from 2018. This book was written by Rev W. Awdry and illustrated by William Middleton, but it was later re-illustrated by C. Reginald Dalby. Now, before we get into it, I just want to set some ground rules for this. I'm basically just going to be talking about the book and what it contains, and the stories in it, and the illustrations and the writing. I'm not going to be comparing it to the other books, the TV series, maybe a little bit, but that's not my main focus. And I'm probably not going to be talking about the history of the book that much. Maybe here and there I'll throw in like tidbits of information, but it's mostly just going to be talking about the book. Rereading the book or reading it for the first time, and then talking about what it was like, what you experienced, and all that stuff. So, without further ado, let's get into the Three Railway Engines. Real quick, all these books have an illustration in the covers called Coal and Coke, I believe. There's just a sign that says that, so no one really knows what this location's called, but it's just a really nice picture of some engines at a station, and it gets you in the mood for some train stories. These books also have a foreword at the beginning from the author, but this one does not, because it's the first one. Our very first story is called Edward's Day Out, and it follows the adventures of Edward getting out of the shed for the first time in a long time. Now, this story establishes some of the characters, mostly just Edward. The rest of the engines aren't named or anything. It's just a story about Edward, who is old and sad, and he's sitting in the engine shed with several other engines. Next to him is Gordon, and then there's two blue engines and a red engine, whose names escape me at the moment, 98462 and 85467 or something like that. They have numbers, not names, and the red one is the red engine, or Alan Greedy or something like that. I don't know, it's weird. And then we have Henry on the very end, but we won't know that it's Henry for a little while. And the driver and fireman come to work to start up Edward, and it's nice. But the thing that confuses me is, though, it says the driver and fireman, it says, they won't choose you again. It kind of makes it seem like the driver and fireman only pick one engine a day. It's really weird because, every engine has a crew, but whatever. They ask Edward why he's sad. Edward wants to come out, and they light his fire, and he comes out. And all the other engines are jealous. Edward's no longer sad. He's glad. So Edward goes to pick up his coaches, which have no couplings for some reason. I believe there's like an in-universe explanation for it, as like the engines were too rough with him, but the illustrator just forgot to add couplings. This is nice because we get introduced to coaches for the first time. These earlier stories kind of like set up the railway a bit, and you learn a little bit about how it works if you had no knowledge prior. So it's nice. We get Edward coming out of the shed after his fire's lit, goes to the yard, picks up some coaches, very gently without banging into them, and then takes them to the station. And Edward just waits at the station for his passengers to get on, and it's all fine and dandy until the guard just isn't there. And you wonder, where's the guard? And they're like, hey, where's the guard? Has anybody seen him? The porter says he saw him last night. And the guard just comes running down the hill with his flags in one hand and his sandwich in the other, and gets into the coaches, and they take off. I think that's kind of funny, just little jokes like that. There's a lot of humor in the Railway series that the writing, I think, is just really funny sometimes, which no one had pointed out to me previously. No one had ever pointed out just how funny it is. It's not like a comedy or anything. There's a lot of funny moments. Edward pulls the train away, and he just has a happy day out. He works very hard. The driver says, I'll take you out again tomorrow. And Edward says, hey, I'm going out again tomorrow. What do you think of that? And the other engines just ignore him, and Edward falls happily asleep. So Edward just has a happy day. Children wave at him, meets his old friends at stations, etc. I like this story. It's a good little start, Engine's sad, engine comes out, engine works, engine goes home. And it's just a cute little story. This was adapted in the TV series, as with the rest of this book, but this story was combined with the next one, so I didn't know about Edward going to the station and the guard forgetting his sandwiches and stuff until I had, looked at adaptations of this a few years ago. So that's that. But overall, I really like this story. The illustrations are really good too. I'm going to be saying that for all these. Probably my favorite illustration out of this whole first story is maybe just Edward leaving the sheds or Edward pulling his train. The backgrounds are really nice too, and the people are great. It's so cool seeing actual people in Thomas and not like these weird looking wooden figures with stick arms. The next story is Edward and Gordon. So Edward's in the shed and we get introduced to his shedmate Gordon. Gordon is very big and very self-important. He pulls the express and he says, "Oh, look out for me, little Edward," and he goes off to pull his express. And Edward goes off to do some shunting. This is where we get introduced to the troublesome trucks, which are another important aspect of just railways in general. The trucks that engines pull, but also important in the Railway series and in Thomas because the trucks are usually the cause of several accidents or mishaps and whatnot. Edward likes shunting, has a lot of fun playing with the trucks, bumps them. Unlike the coaches, that's contrasted from the last story, he's very gentle with coaches. He just bumps the trucks for fun here. And he pushes them around and plays until all the trucks are organized. And he's just, again, having a good time because he's not stuck in the shed anymore. Presently, Gordon comes by, and he's also pulling trucks. And he's not too happy about it. He's complaining, a goods train, the shame of it, the shame of it. And he's not having a good time. He looks pretty upset. But Edward thinks it's pretty funny, and goes off to find more trucks. Little thing in the illustrations, in the previous one, there's some men going over to this truck, or lorry, I guess. And the next one, there's trucks over by it, and they're loading it with wood. So, little continuity there. And Gordon leaves and gets stuck on the hill, which is why it becomes Gordon's Hill, why it's named that later. So later, a porter comes up to Edward and says, "Gordon's stuck on the hill. Go help him." And we see Gordon stuck, and he's very upset by the looks of it. And he says the noisy trucks hold an engine back. Again, showing very early on that the trucks can be a big nuisance for engines. Edward comes to help. Gordon says, "I can't do it, I can't do it." Edward says, "I will do it, I will do it." They go back and forth, and eventually they do it. They get to the top of the hill. Gordon speeds down the other side and doesn't even thank Edward. Edward gets left behind. In the illustration, the guard is waving to Edward, waving thanks or goodbye. I think that's a nice little touch. But yeah, Edward is looking pretty shocked. So Edward gets to the next station because he can't catch up to Gordon. He just stops for a nice long drink of water, which shows us that steam engines need water, which I feel like people might already know going into this. They need coal and water, but it just shows, for the first time, an engine getting water. So that's nice. And the driver says he'll get out his paint tomorrow and paint Edward a beautiful new coat of blue and red stripes. So he'll be the smartest engine in the shed. Even though his paint doesn't look that bad in this illustration, it looks pretty good. This is probably my favorite illustration of this book, just because Edward, he's, after his big adventure, he's calming down with a nice drink, and he's nice and happy. And there's a truck there, and in the background we see just a town with factories and stuff. It just looks nice. It feels alive, I guess. There's just always stuff going on in the background. And you can see off in the distance hills and sometimes towns and cities. I don't know. I just really love the illustration and the style of this. This story was pretty short, and so was the one before it, and so was the one after it. The stories in this book are actually pretty short. That goes for all of the Railway series, really, but these ones in particular are shorter. Speaking of which, the next story is The Sad Story of Henry, and look at that. We have 2 lines on one page. Once an engine attached to a train was afraid of a few drops of rain. It went into a tunnel and squeaked through its funnel and never came out again. Never, not didn't, never. Yeah, and that's just like 4 pages right there. The illustration's on one page and the words are on the other, which I like, but they just went through 4 right there with just a little poem. The engine's name was Henry. This is our proper introduction to Henry, who is going to be a bigger character later on. Originally, I believe the author didn't like Henry and tried to write him out several times, In fact, this story could honestly be him getting written out. But the fourth story is the happy ending, where all the characters are brought back together. So, it all works out. Henry doesn't want to come out because he's afraid the rain will spoil his lovely green paint and red stripes. He's not afraid of the rain, he's afraid of what the rain will do to his image. And he's just vain like that. So, that's a good excuse, I guess. I don't like how in the TV series and like CGI, he's literally afraid of the rain. I think that's kind of dumb because rain's just water. Water goes into him. But, whatever. Guard blows his whistle and waves his flag, and Henry says, "Oh, I'm not going to spoil my lovely paint for you." So eventually, a passenger train arrives, and a fat director who's on the train, tells the guard to get a rope. A fat director, says the fat director later. This is the director of the railway. Sir Topham Hatt. But we don't know that just yet. "We will pull you out," he says. So all these poor passengers get out in the rain with a rope and try to pull Henry out of the tunnel. And it looks really funny. It looks a lot better than in the TV series. Because they're like real people. They aren't like the wooden stick figures. And I don't know. I love the idea of these poor people having to get out of their train and thinking that they're able to move this like 80-ton steam engine. They pull, and then the director says his doctor has forbidden him to pull. So they try pushing Henry out from the other end. They push and they push. My doctor has forbidden me to push, and nothing happens. And again, these poor people have to get out of their train and push it out of the tunnel. And I think that's just really funny. And nothing happens, of course, because, you can't move an 80-ton steam engine and several coaches. Eventually, another train arrives, and the engine tries to push Henry out. The rain stops, the engine tries to push, nothing happens. The engine that tries to push is the red engine, the one that we saw earlier in the book. We don't know who this engine is. It looks like James, but it's a little different than James. It has yellow stripes and red wheels. James we'll meet later. So it's not James, it's just some random red engine that we don't really see again. But no matter what they do, Henry just refuses to get out and he stays in the tunnel. So they leave him there. They say, "We shall leave you here for always and always and always." And they take up the rails and build a brick wall in front of Henry. And he's stuck there. A lot of people have complained about this. A lot of parents and people just like, they're locking him in the tunnel. It's, but it's not like, super dark or anything. The way I see it, it's like a child being put in timeout, not like something sinister. Because, spoiler alert, Henry gets out of the tunnel in the very next story, both in the Railway series and the TV series. He's in timeout for a little bit. The people still get home, everything works out. Henry just stays in there to learn his lesson, to not be so vain and to think about others. But yeah, he gets stuck in there, and yeah. They say they cut a new tunnel, but we don't really see it. That was never in the TV show. There's just always another tunnel next to Henry's, even in the book. So, yeah. The odd thing is, at the very end, the author or storyteller says, "But I think he deserved it. Don't you?" I don't think so. Maybe a stern talking to, but don't brick him in the tunnel. Again, he does get out the very next story, but yeah, kind of weird. I kind of like this illustration too, of Henry just looking kind of shocked. But my favorite illustration definitely has to be the people trying to push and pull him out. I think that's just pretty funny. I don't know why. As a kid, I was like, I didn't think anything of it. But now that I sit and I think about it, these poor people have to get out of their train and try and push it. Not like the train is, stuck or something. The train just refuses to move. I don't know. I think that's just kind of funny. Our fourth and final story is called Edward, Gordon, and Henry. All the Railway series books have 4 short stories, with the exception of one. But we'll get into that another time. So, it establishes Henry in the tunnel again, and Edward and Gordon from the previous stories. And we learn that Edward and Gordon often go through the tunnel. Edward says, "Peep, peep, hello," and Gordon says, "Poop, poop, serves you right." I think that's just them trying to establish that Gordon's whistle is lower than Edward's. But, I don't know, he says poop, poop. I don't know, poop, whatever. Someone will find it funny, I guess. But Henry has no steam to answer, and his fire's out, and he's all dirty. His paint got ruined because he stayed in the tunnel, which he said, wouldn't happen. He's going to stay in the tunnel to stay safe from the rain, but being in the dirty tunnel made his paint ruined anyways. Anyway, that doesn't matter. Gordon's pulling the express now. We learned that many important people ride on the express, including the fat director who punished Henry. And Gordon's trying to go as fast as he can, and the coaches are just saying trickety-trock, whatever that means, that I actually don't know. And Gordon sees Henry in the tunnel, and he says, I'm gonna poop at Henry. But he doesn't. There's a wee that's how it's spelled, not like weesh, it's just like wee, and then there's a big line, and then the sh. So, yeah, Gordon makes a cloud of steam, and he goes slower and slower and slower, and he's burst his safety valve, which means he can't really get up to speed. He can't go fast. So, he can't really pull the express. Gordon is like, oh, this is terrible. We were going so nicely, too. And Henry laughs at him, and Gordon makes a face. We can't see the face, but I just love Henry sitting in the tunnel laughing. Everybody gets out, and the fat director says, I never liked these big engines. Always going wrong. Send for another engine at once. And he just complains about the big engines, which makes sense. He doesn't have that many engines. And in the previous story, we saw how a big engine went wrong. It got too vain and it stayed in the tunnel. So he does have a point. Gordon gets put on a siding out of the way, and they go find Edward, who's left in the shed, the only engine available. Edward tries to pull the train, and he can't. He's not strong enough. So Gordon says, why not let Henry try? The fat director says, yes, I will. I like Edward's face here, just struggling. That's neat. They ask if Henry will help pull the train, and Henry says yes. So Gordon's driver and fireman light his fire, and some plate layers come and break the wall down and put down the rails. Henry's very stiff, and the director tells him to go find a turntable, so Henry comes out of the tunnel. I don't know why this was done like this. The brick wall is destroyed, obviously, and they come and have people build the track in front of Henry, the section that was taken away. Why not just have Henry revert out of the tunnel? I know it is kind of dangerous to go backwards down the main line or any line for tender engines, but I think that would have been better. Just go back and then switch around somewhere instead of waiting for plate layers to come and build the rails in front of him again. I feel like that would have taken a while. And this is the express. People want to get to their destination in a hurry. So, I don't know. I feel like maybe he couldn't have switched around, so they had to get him out forwards, but that just seems weird to me. Like in the show, he backs out of the tunnel, so maybe that's why I think it's weird, but they waited for plate layers to show up and build new tracks for him to drive on. I don't know, I feel like that's just kind of weird. Eventually, Henry feels better, gets coupled up to Edward, and they pull hard and eventually get the train going, and it's a very happy and triumphant moment for them. And the two of them working together get the train going through the tunnel and on their way to the station. And all the passengers are just really excited. The director leans his head out the window to wave at Edward, but the train goes so fast that his hat blows off and a goat eats it. So, sucks to suck, I guess, I don't know. They get to the station at the end of the line. The passengers all say thank you, and the fat director rewards Henry with a new coat of paint. And he asks to be painted blue with red stripes like Edward. So, he does. And it's a nice little illustration right here, probably my favorite, of him being repainted blue from his green. Henry stays blue for a couple books, but eventually he goes back to green, because it does look kind of confusing, because him and Gordon have similar shapes, and now the exact same color scheme. All three engines go back to the shed quietly, and now they're all friends, and everything's happy. Henry's proud of his paint, as all good engines are, but he doesn't mind the rain now, because he knows the best way to keep his paint nice is not to run into tunnels, but to ask his driver to rub him down when the day's work is over. And everybody's happy, and no one's stuck in a tunnel anymore, no one's stuck on a hill, no one's being mean. The end. Or so it would be, because there are 25 more books, and then I think 16 more after that. My favorite illustration is this one here of Henry being repainted. And that concludes the first book. I wanted to point out the writing in these stories, and I guess there wasn't like anything specifically that stuck out to me in particular, but the writing is good. It's not like dumbed down to like a really childish level. but at the same time, the words aren't super big or complex. It's made for, like a parent to read to their kid, and the writing is pretty good. It's not boring writing or anything. It's not super descriptive. It's simple. It's not too complex. I don't know how to describe it. It's just good writing, and the illustrations are good too. And you could read this over and over again and probably not get super bored of it, because that was the intention. Awdry went on record and said, like, you don't write just for kids, write for the poor parent, the poor soul that has to read this over and over again to them. And it shows, it really does. Because even like me, I'm an adult and I'm entertained by these books. So yeah, pretty good. I'd say overall this book is really good as just an introduction to the world and the railway and the engines, 3 of them. There's no Thomas. Thomas is not as big a character in the books as he is in the show. Thomas is in the next book. It's his book. But we just get an introduction to the world at first. And the 3 railway engines. Not the 3 big engines. The 3 big engines are Gordon, Henry, and James. But the 3 railway engines are Gordon, Henry, and Edward. It's a good story. A good book with 4 good stories in it. And it's simple. It's a very quick read. It's only 62 pages, not counting illustrations. Well, it's only 62 pages, and half of those are illustrations, so it's like 30-something pages. And yeah, it's just a good read. There's not much else I can say about this book, because it's not bad. It's a good read, it's a good book. But the other ones are a lot more interesting to me, and there's not much I can really point out that I don't think I haven't pointed out already. So, would I recommend this book? I'd recommend all of these, especially this one, because it's the first one. You have to read this one. But, overall, good book. A really solid start to the series. And it has a nice conclusion, a nice ending, because this wasn't intended to be a series at first. This started out as just, bedtime stories for Awdry's son, Christopher. But eventually, they decided to publish them. I believe his wife persuaded him to publish them. But that was clearly a good idea, because these were very successful and spawned a very successful franchise. If you don't want to watch the Thomas show because you're turned off by it because it looks like it's for kids, which, it is, but I would recommend reading the books. The books are pretty good, and, a lot of people say, oh, the book's better than the movie or the show. And honestly, they're right for a lot of these. I'll get into that later. I'm just kind of rambling on now, but yeah. Railway Series good. You should read it. Yeah. Anyway, that's the first episode done. The format of the show might change. If people want me to talk about the history or something, I will. I just kind of want to keep it casual and have me talk about the books and reading them and everything. Just chill. Here's the book. Here's what I think about it. And that's that. Next time, we will take a look at the second book, Thomas the Tank Engine. And we'll meet the titular Thomas the Tank Engine and see what he's all about. But for now, this has been Railway Series Reread. I'm Nick TF89, and I hope to see you again